Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Varsity Aces Live. My name is Darren Cooper, a local sports columnist on NorthJersey.com. And since this is our second to last show of this school year, we got one big show left next week. But this week, we're going to look back at the season to come, and we're getting the band back together. Varsity Aces Live, the only ones on the show tonight are the only Varsity Aces themselves. The fifth member of our crew will be in just a minute. You'll see what we did for him. But right now, I want to introduce you to, ladies and gentlemen, the world-famous Varsity Aces, Mr. Greg Matura. Salute.
My pleasure.
Mr. Sean Farrell.
Good to see you tonight, Darren.
And the one and only king of North Jersey track, Mr. Paul Schwartz. How are you doing tonight, guys?
Doing well.
Guys, it seemed like it was the longest high school sports season ever. For those of us with kids, that would be me and Mr. Matura, who're still in school. It's been the longest school year ever, almost like it never ended. And we want to talk about what the biggest stories were in the last 16, 12, 8 months. I don't know. It all kind of blurs together. It has been a historic season, as always, on and off the field. So, Mr. Matura, when somebody asks you about the 2020, 2021 school year, what are you going to remember? What do you think the biggest story is?
Well, I'm going to go back to a bizarre start to the football season, which was July 13th. It was a Monday. It seems like it was only a little while ago, and yet it seems like it was 2 years ago. Football teams were allowed to practice, but you were not allowed to exchange footballs. I went to Ramsey's first practice. New coach Adam Bayer bought nets for the quarterbacks to throw into. Each kid was given about 4 or 5 footballs that he was only allowed to touch. The receivers ran routes, but there were no footballs thrown. The running backs ran through gaps, but again, they did not have footballs in their hands either. It was just the first opportunity to get outside in the face of this pandemic. There you see one of the quarterbacks taking his own football out of the net that Bayer bought. Yep, lots of Lysol, lots of hand sanitizer, lots of safety going on there, cleaning, showering, lots of laundry. And that was Monday, July 13th. It was a brave new world. By the end of that first week, Ramsey already had to shut it down, not because anybody on the team had COVID, but there was a fear that there might be a chance that one of the players might have been with someone who had it. I forget, it seems so long ago, but they did not have it, but they had to sit out in quarantine for 2 weeks. And that's the kind of world it was last summer, 2020. So that's how I started off. My first time out of the house in several months covering an event. I forgot to bring a bottle of water. I didn't bring a hat, so I boiled and sweated. I was just so excited to be outside for the first time, but it was bizarre.
Yeah, I think I'll remember my first football game. I was at Hasbrook Heights, right, with all the restrictions in place, standing in the end zone, right? We were all standing in the end zone, not able to be on the sidelines and be close to the field. Paul, what's your first COVID event, in-person thing?
Well, I live in Wanacue in the reserve, and so I went to a outdoor practice of the Lakeland cross country team.
Yeah.
Which was right around the corner, and it was brutally hot. It was probably around the same day you went out, Greg, and it was brutally hot. And they ran up from the school, and if you've ever been to Lakeland, you go straight uphill up into the Skyline Drive area. And I drove my car up, parked it, and waited for this team that eventually won their first ever sectional title to go up there. And that was exciting to be there, and then we went to South Carolina soon afterwards.
Sean, what was your first COVID game? What was your first moment?
My first COVID game, appropriately enough, was Old Tappan in Wayne Valley. It was on my birthday, but I was so happy to have sports back and high school sports back after the 6-month layoff that I didn't care where I was on my birthday. And like you, Darren, I was standing on the sideline behind one of the end zones. I couldn't roam up and down, so I couldn't see that well if the play was on the other side of the field. But, so much joy to be back on the field because, as you guys know, you didn't know what games you would be covering on a day-to-day basis, much less a week-to-week basis. I know coaches were so concerned about getting the email or getting the phone call that they would be shut down. We had one boys soccer team that was shut down 20 minutes before the state tournament. So, I mean, that was, poor Woodridge, who had a great season. So that was just a cloud that seemed to loom over everyone. But at the same time, you had so many coaches that say this was the most rewarding season ever. I remember Evan Baumgarten of the Ramapo boys soccer team, because you had to go through so many extra challenges. Athletes were put in situations they've never been in before and really showed their character. So in a lot of ways, it was a year some positives to come out of it.
All right, what else stands out?
I remember, Darren, at one point I volunteered to cover a game by stream, a football game by stream. And it was supposed to be Lakeland versus Northern Highlands, I think. But Lakeland had 4 different games with 4 different teams in 4 different divisions. Yeah. And I'm not sure they ever played. And then we couldn't get this. Then we couldn't get the stream to work. So that was, but I guess what we did learn is that you could stream games, and that schools that never had before ended up streaming games. So I think after all was said and done, there was more available for the fans to see, even if they couldn't get to a game in person, than ever before, which was really a great advance.
Well, Mr. Ventura, I know you got more than that. What about on the field? What stands out? What else stands out to you about the last 10 months?
It's sort of been referenced. I covered a scrimmage for the first time in a million years and had to stand a mile back from the field. You referenced that, how you were in the end zone for Hasbrook Heights. Each school had a different rule. Some schools you had to be you had to fill out a form. Other schools you had to have a form and have your temperature checked. Obviously, always staying away from other people. I had the pleasure of watching a tremendously exciting game between Riverdale and Ramapo. I guess that kind of jumps out at me. Riverdale went for a 2-point conversion at the end of the game in the final minutes. They converted it. I had to run from the other end of the field because, again, that was a game where we were only allowed to be in the end zone. That snapped Ramapo's 2+ year winning streak. So, I ran about, 150 yards there from one end of the field to the other for fear that I would be at the wrong end of the field when that play came down. But that kind of jumps out at me more than any other game that I covered during the fall season.
All right, Mr. Schwa, your turn. This was I don't know how many years you've been doing this, like 5 or 6, I think. I know
you're 50 on July 20th.
And so tell me, what do you think stand out to you by year 49 plus?
Well, just the idea, and it's been brought up by everybody, that we went from basically that to, by the end of the year, a normal finish to the season. And I'm sure Sean will talk about that, and you will talk about that. For me, Angelina Perez was such an important factor. She had been the last North Jersey athlete to win a state title at the Indoor Track and Field Championships in March of 2020, right before we shut down. I'm not sure whether it was the last event or whether basketball went a little further, although they didn't make it to the finals. And then, of course, she was involved early season in cross country. She had a marvelous year. And the first live event I actually covered was the state sectional championships in cross country in November at Garrett Mountain. But, and she had a dominant year until we got to last Saturday's State Meet of Champions, which was an extraordinary event. And you're seeing the finals. Angelina had taken this huge lead, was on her way apparently to a record, but it was too hot and she went out too hard, self-admittedly. And then in the black and yellow, you see freshman Christina Allen, who seems as shocked as anybody else that she had actually come from behind and won the race. And in the middle is Lindsay Hausman of Kent Place. It was clear from the film, it was very close. The 3 girls finished 0.12 seconds apart. That's Coach Mike Urso, who's one of the best coaches in North Jersey in track, congratulating her. And that's Amanda Merkovich, who had just gotten a medal herself, coming up to congratulate her. And it looks like she's still stunned as to what had just transpired, as was everybody in the building at South Plainfield last Saturday. That's something I think people will be talking about that race for as long as there's track and field in New Jersey and anyone can remember it. I'm just so excited that these same spring athletes who got absolutely nothing last year, and that's the only season that got absolutely nothing last year, got a chance to get pretty much everything this year, which is a little bit different. Basketball didn't go to a state final. Cross country and the fall sports ended at the sectional area. But I think it's fitting that the first full season with a state championship was the spring season, because that whole crew lost everything.
That was some finish in the race, and we thank the guys at Mile Split for letting us show that video. You are watching Varsity Aces live, recapping the 2020-21 high school sports year in North Jersey. And I think this just in that it's just Varsity Aces only today. We're just hanging out. But I believe our fifth ace is on assignment today. But Mr. Tartaglia couldn't let this go. He wanted to chime in with what he thought was the biggest moment of the past 10 months.
Well, good day, fellow Varsity Aces. Greg Tartaglia, NorthJersey.com, and I'm on Yankees detail tonight, but I could not miss this show because, believe it or not, this concludes the 20th year of covering high school sports in North Jersey for me. Now, I know they haven't all been at the record, but it's kind of wild to think about. The first week, the week before, I should say the week I started at WGHT Radio, 1500, way back when, was the week before 9/11. Now here we are wrapping up a school year post-COVID. So certainly a lot of heavier news events going on in those two instances. And many of you who follow along know I kind of prefer the lighter side of the news. But this year in particular, I found enjoyment in doing the stories about redemption. You know, when something good comes out of something maybe not so good. And look no further than girls basketball, which I've been doing for a couple of years. Woodridge comes out with a brand new coach. Taylor Waynert takes over after her uncle Lou dies. Now, I had known that Lou had 487 wins, but for some reason, I just didn't put it together that, hey, Taylor and her team get 13. That's like making 500 for the Waynert family. So they unrolled the poster there, 500 for Lou. And honestly, I didn't go to that game knowing that they were going to do that. So not only was it a great story, it's kind of one that sort of stumbled upon as well. Of course, you know me in the bowling. And honestly, the Bergen County bowling tournaments, boys and girls, were the only two indoor county tournaments we had in any sport this winter. So it was great to see them keep going. You know, there's like 50-year histories, 40, 50-year histories for both of them. And for the boys, I mean, another 300 game, the first since 2013. Ethan Moskovitz, who we had as a guest right here on Varsity Aces Live, finishing it off for Mawa. Mawa had both individual county champions, Bergen County boys and girls. Bergen Tech teams had the county championships for the boys and the girls. And I got to tell you, Bergen Tech, look at that. In the past 2 years, past two bowling seasons, has given me two of the best pictures ever between Jeff G and his surprise look when, they won by one pin, the boys did 2 years ago. And to the girls now, just those seniors and how much it meant to them to win another tournament was really outstanding. But I think if we're talking redemption and we're talking about just overall, you know, something good really coming out of something bad, it has to be the Marshall football story that we did in November, the 50-year anniversary of the Marshall plane crash in which 4 North Jersey football alums passed away. 2 from Lyndhurst was Ted Shoebridge and Marcella Lotterman. It was Kevin Harris. It was Kevin Gilmore from Harrison, and it was Art Harris from Passaic. And just talking with the Shoebridge brothers and the Lotterman brothers, the Shoebridge brothers were at Lyndhurst for a ceremony that they did the weekend of the 50-year anniversary of the incident, you know, talking to the Shoebridge brothers, how they try and carry on Ted's legacy. You know, I talked to the Lotterman brothers for the story. They were actually out at Marshall for the fountain ceremony and talking about Marcelo and his legacy that he carries on. And it was touching. It was, you know what, it was really something neat to kind of dig up a lot of these historical facts because I love it, but also because really you get to see and get to hear how the brothers and the families and everybody is kind of keeping alive the memory, taking something that, you know, really was horrible. And yet there are so many, you know, things that traits and personality traits that, you know, the guys had, the Marshall players had that they still try and keep alive today. So that's what we've been trying to do here. That's what we try and do every year. The Varsity Aces keep alive those stories from North Jersey all around. And we thank you so much for joining us. And I guess the guys will take you through the rest of the show.
Boy, I listening to that. That was really well done. It brought back memories because I talked to Art Harris's sister, and I had some friends, who still remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it was a life-changing moment for them. So that brought back some memories just watching that.
And I was able to track down Keith Carl of Elmwood Park, who was actually, if you watch the movie We Are Marshall, it's the actual footage of him celebrating Marshall's astounding victory when they came back the following year. And he really hadn't talked about it to us for the entire time. And we had him on Varsity Aces, and he was terrific. And he reconnected with Tommy Shoebridge, who he had known 50 years earlier. That was a great moment.
Well, guys, I think it's my turn. I could make the easy call and say, well, boy, the biggest moment on the field was the Bosco-Bergen football game coming down to the very last play. And it is a great moment. It is a great moment coming down to the last play. Ethan Acevedo scored a touchdown to beat Bergen Catholic. I kind of look back, guys, and see us as a smaller part in a much bigger world, in a big state, in a big country, a lot of issues, a lot of things going on, and the handling, or some would say maybe the mishandling, of the name changes at Pascagoula Valley Regional, where Pascagoula Valley dropping the Indians nickname and now going with Panthers, and then Pascagoula Hills kind of getting caught up in that because they're a sister district and morphing from Cowboys to Broncos. I think I speak for the Aces when I say, like, when we think of Pascagoula Valley and Pascagoula Hills, we don't necessarily think of districts that are poorly run or poorly managed or have poor athletic offerings or poor students and even to see a superintendent and a board of education and a community all try to come to some sort of consensus about what's the right term to use was just fascinating in the backdrop of COVID. Some people were saying we shouldn't do this right now. There's COVID going on. And some people saying, well, this is the perfect time to do this. In the end, the nicknames were changed. And I think this is a story that's going to play out again in our little world. I know Wayne Valley just came out recently and said, no, we're not changing Indians. And I'm curious to see if Passaic will visit the topic. So to me, that's the biggest story about how our corner of the world epitomized everything else that was going on in the world. And it's still an issue it's had a lot of ramifications. I mean, listen, it's no coincidence. Pascagoula Hills has a new athletic director. They'll have a new football coach. They'll have a new basketball coach. A new baseball coach. The superintendent is gone now. Daniel Fishbein's in, as a new superintendent. So it's just a big story, for that big part of our coverage area. So to me, that's one of the big stories that stands out. It's kind of an off the field story, but I thought it was a big one. But so much of our work is on the field, and we're writing about the kids and the athletes and the coaches. Mr. Farrell, what are you going to remember most about 2020, 2021?
Well, first of all, Darren, I appreciate that you upgraded your jersey to the 13-time Stanley Cup champion Toronto Maple Leafs. But that's besides the point. If 2020 was the year of the pandemic, to me, 2021 was the year of Don Bosco Boys Across. It's not often that you see a team that might be the best team ever in Bergen County history, and this Don Bosco team legitimately has a case. They end up winning league, county, state, and Tournament of Champions titles. They're the first Bergen County boys team to win the TOC, only the fourth ever to win the overall state championship. And it was just storybook because it's coming after a lost season, after losing the entire 2020 spring. And what really stuck out to me about this team was their chemistry. Some teams have great Division I talent, but they don't find the way to make it click. And with Don Bosco, they had that talent, and they found a way to put the ego aside and do whatever it takes to get the job done. Now, Don Bosco had three fantastic attackers, Colton Marquis, Connor Gorman, and Mason Carfello. And if you lock down on them, one of their midfielders was going to step up and get the job done. And at the end of the day, if they won the game, they really didn't care what the box score was, and they just kept winning games and winning more games. And, to the second point about chemistry, they had so many players from the same club team. I think that was a huge advantage in a year when so many teams were starting from scratch to build a varsity lineup. You didn't have a lot of experience on the fields around Bergen County, whether it was lacrosse or softball or baseball. I know all of us saw some games that were maybe a little sloppier than usual because players were building that chemistry and trying to get up to speed with some teammates that maybe they hadn't met or hadn't known for a while. So for Don Bosco to have so many guys who were familiar with each other was really an X factor this year. And the crazy thing about them, they're going to run it back next year in 2022. 5 of their 6 offensive starters will come back, 2 starting defensemen, and a fantastic face-off man. So this is far from the last time you'll hear about Don Bosco lacrosse.
Wow, Joe, that's a great tipping off point because, all right, Aces, I'm going to put y'all on the spot. This year, 1 year from now, make a prediction for me. What do you think we're going to be talking about in 12 months? I know you love this, Mr. Matura. I know you love it. Mr. Schwartz, give me a name or a school or a sport or a trend or something you think that we might be talking about this time next year.
We might have 2 national contenders in cross country, the Ridgewood girls team, which loses 2 tremendous runners in Sarah Palicano and Claire Hamlet, but returns everybody else from what would have been the best team in the state had we gotten a chance to do a full season. And of course, Angelina Perez comes back for another year. And she won the virtual national championship in cross country last year, the Nike virtual. Maybe next year she'll be able to win the Nike cross country championship. And by the way, from track, 3 defending state meet of champions girls return. Casey Sullivan of Demarest, Nikki Woods of Demarest, and Christina Allen of Riverdale. But there's a chance I could see that Christina Allen of Riverdale runs the mile next year and maybe takes a shot at Josette Norris's Bergen County record, Josette just missing the Olympics. So I'm girl-centric in this part, and with good reason.
All right, I'll save Mr. Matur for second to last. Mr. Sean, what do you think? Wrestling?
Yeah.
Where you want to go? Jimmy Mullen wrestling? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. New Jersey is a big wrestling state, so I mean that's going to be a lot of the focus going into 2022. We didn't have wrestling in Boardwalk Hall, Darren. That's usually an annual tradition. Go down Boardwalk Hall, get some shore action in, and see some great wrestling in front of sometimes.
We didn't do our shopping trip. We didn't get to do our shopping trip.
I need to update the wardrobe. So we're used to those big crowds at Boardwalk Hall. We didn't get anything like that this year in Phillipsburg, as great as a venue as that was and as nicely as that was presented. But you didn't have those dramatic moments on Saturday at Boardwalk Hall. I think it's going to be a bounce-back year for North Jersey. Only 1 champion this year, and Aaron Azaroff of Paramus, who is unbelievable. But if I remember correctly, 5 or 6 finalists, and a lot of them underclassmen. And as you mentioned, Jimmy Mullen didn't even wrestle this year in the state tournament. He had a national tournament he was competing in. So St. Joe's is going to have a loaded team next year. And how about Bergen Catholic? The big story in 2021 is St. Joe's finally going to be better than Bergen Catholic in wrestling. And there was so much drama leading up to the dual meet, and it never happened. They didn't wrestle against Del Barton. They didn't wrestle against Paramus Catholic. So you couldn't even see mutual opponents between St. Joe's and Bergen Catholic. So are we finally going to get the great number 1 versus number 2 matchup that we didn't get this year? And 2, how many state champions are we going to get? Are some of those underclassmen who really shined in Phillipsburg going to take that next step and get over the hump?
All right. So, Mr. Matur, do you think, I'll put you on the spot for a second. You and I both thought both Bergen and Bosco were legitimate threats to win boys basketball, right? So do you think either one could do it next year? I know you're not thrilled with making predictions. Do you think they're in the mix?
Sure, why not? But I'm going in a different direction.
Ooh, okay.
And that is we are going to have 1 more school year of a normal schedule that we had been used to. We're going to have a regular Bergen County Jamboree We're going to have a regular Passaic County tournament for boys and girls. Let us not forget that the NJSIAA wants to shorten many of the sports seasons, most notably sports in the winter, including boys basketball. And usually the county tournaments are completed a couple of days before the state tournaments start. And so this coming school year is going to be an opportunity to go back and remember the way it was, because we don't know how it's going to be the following year. And let's not forget also that a lot of the basketball coaches were left out of the discussion. That's nice that they polled the opinion of student ambassadors.
Mm-hmm.
But it really should have been the coaches that they should have been discussing it with. The coaches battled and got back part of those 3 weeks that the NJSIA was going to try to take away from the basketball season. Let's see if the coaches continue, and then let's enjoy 21-22 for being the way that it was, because 22-23 could start to be a whole new different world for us.
And Greg, I think I agree with you. I don't think this is done. They think it's done. I don't think it's done. It's not just basketball coaches that are annoyed. It's volleyball, it's track, it's wrestling to a certain extent. It's everybody but football. And I think there's going to be some pushback. And thank goodness there's a year before it starts for people to get some perspective and to think a little bit more about it. I don't think this is done.
You guys are all bringing up some fascinating things. I'm realizing that this upcoming football season will be the last one where we do not have true state champions. For the first time since 1931, we'll have true state champions in 2022. I'm going to say that I think we're going to continue to see the expansion of girls wrestling, and I think we're going to continue to see the expansion of the girls flag football. I think they wanted to expand to 16 teams. I wouldn't be surprised if they up it to 24 teams next year. I think that there's going to be more opportunity for student athletes next year. And I think Bergen Catholic will beat Bosco in football. There you go. Let's wrap it up that way. I'll go out on the ledge for that. Guys, thank you all for spending some time with me all together. We don't get to hang out and do this very often. This was cool. Mr. Tartago did a great job. Mr. Matura, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Let us not forget that about a year ago at this time that what we were doing was off camera discussing how we were all going to start an Uber Eats company to get ourselves through the summer, because there wasn't a lot to cover at this time last year.
That's very true. Mr. Farrell, thank you for all your hard work and everything you did. Thank you for coming on tonight. Mr. Schwartz, always great to see you. When are you going back? When are you going back south?
About 3 weeks. But I'm looking forward to the cross-country season remotely, and hopefully we'll be back for the climactic meets in the fall, and looking forward to a completely normal 21-22 season.
Right, boys, we did make it. I want to thank Mr. Tartaglio too for his contribution earlier in the show. This is not the last Varsity Aces Live of the year, though. This time next week, the North Jersey Sports Awards will be broadcast on NorthJersey.com and all our channels. You're going to want to see who did we pick as the wrestler of the year, the athlete of the year for boys and girls, the coach of the year, the team of the year. Trust me, it is a big show. You're not going to want to miss it. And then special time, Thursday night, next Thursday, July 1st, we're going to have some of the winners of the big sports awards on with us on Varsity Aces Live. But for now, we're going to wrap things up. Remember, let the coaches coach, the players play, and the officials officiate. And let the Varsity Aces tell you what you need to know. Good night, everybody.